Today, I want to ask a simple question. Should men get married? If you're like me and you've spent a lot of time in social media lately, and like me, you really enjoy a lot of the gender debates that are on there, then you've probably noticed there's a huge cohort who believe that marriage is stacked against men, and no man in his right mind who wants to have a happy future should get married. Now, I'm going to admit that I lean a little bit on that side as well. I happen to think that marriage is quite stacked against men. But my gut instinct and the reality are two very different things. So I want to take a moment to really do the research on the question of men and marriage. Are men really screwed in this day and age? Is that something that we should be avoiding? But let's have a look at some of the main arguments against marriage for guys and what the science is saying, so you can see the journey that I went on. So first of all, finding financial data for divorce settlements proved to be surprisingly hard. And it was difficult because only 9% of divorce cases actually make their way to court, which means, yes, in 91% of cases, divorce settlements are agreed outside of the legal system, and so the results are not publicly recorded. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, when a guy first starts dating a woman. Now, I know a lot of us, we like to think about the multimillionaire guy dating cute receptionist, but in most cases, that's not what's happening. And we know that because the average childless woman between the ages of 20 and 30 earns more than the average guy between the ages of 20 and 30. Also, we know that the average woman dates a guy who's a few years older than her. So most of the time, he's going to be further along his career trajectory than hers, which means that he's going to be earning a bit more than her, but not necessarily a lot more in most cases. So when you guys start to date, your quality of life goes up. It goes up, first of all, because the one household has almost double the income. And it goes up also because when two people live together, the cost of living is a lot less than double. On top of that, the data clearly shows that married men earn on average 15% more than their single counterparts. So there is a 15% financial advantage to men being married. So far, the marriage proposition looks pretty good from a financial angle. But imagine that things don't go well and divorce occurs. And this is where I think a lot of contention appears. And this is where I start to have very mixed feelings, because as we know in the legal system, it is possible for a woman to claim half of everything the guy has. Now, I need to say this, first of all, just because it's possible for her to claim half doesn't mean it happens all the time or even most of the time, just that it can happen. Now, I do feel torn because there are certainly cases like the multimillionaire sports, football player who marries the receptionist who's on $45,000 a year. They're married for 3 years and suddenly she's entitled to $30 million just for having been married to him. And I think that is a little bit suspect at best. But again, guys, let's be honest. That isn't most of you, okay? Because the average guy is average. That means he's not super wealthy. That means that there's not this massive wealth disparity. And remembering the fact that the average woman aged between 20 and 30 who doesn't have kids earns more than the average guy between those ages, it's clear that what happens in most marriages when women have children is that they either give up their entire career or purposely damage their career trajectory in order to make time to have those kids. And so when divorce comes along and she starts to ask for half that money, she would have made as much money as you anyway. You've got to remember that your career trajectory, you were ahead of her when you first met. That's probably why a lot of times guys are still making more money than the woman. But with all that being said, I'm still not convinced that things are completely fair in divorce courts. I think they're a hell of a lot better in a lot of Western countries, but if you guys live in the USA, oh my God, that is a shambles of a family court system. The degree to which it's possible for women to lie and manipulate the court system to prevent men from getting access to kids, to prevent men from having a fair say in the judicial system is really quite, well, it's horrific. But let's not forget that at least as of 2017, the average child payments every year was $3,431. That is hardly a career-breaking amount of money to have to pay every year. Okay, so when it comes to finances, so far, there are some benefits, but there's also some potentially very big drawbacks. Now, one of the standard narratives that I see a lot on social media right now is that after divorce, men lose half their money, They often lose their kids. It is really hard for them to get their lives back together because now they're being constantly hamstrung by having to pay child support to another woman. Meanwhile, the woman has the love of the kids. She's got half the guy's money, and she can go and date whoever she likes. In fact, she can go and date a wealthy guy and start being taken care of by him in the near future as well. But in fact, I've seen multiple studies, most notably one that was conducted at the University of Essex, which shows that women's financial well-being drops dramatically in the years following a divorce, especially if there are kids involved. You see, first of all, if women have children and have taken sole custody of their kids, it's usually because they were the primary child carer, which means that they gave up their whole career or a portion of the career. So yes, they've gotten half of the husband's money, maybe they've gotten half, but all of a sudden their earning capacity has reduced dramatically. Now they find themselves with kids full-time, which means it's harder to work a job that'll make as much money because they've also got to take care of the kids. But on top of that, their careers are far behind that of the husband. Then they also have to look after the kids. What does that mean? It means that because they've got them, it's harder to go on dates. It's harder to meet men. And contrary to popular belief, the world is not full of millionaire guys just lining up waiting to marry divorced single mums. Men, on the contrary, start to make a lot more money. This isn't necessarily because they're single, but you see, men's career trajectories and their income follow a non-linear curve. So a man's income at the age of 30 and the age of 40 is a hell of a lot different if he's a regular career guy. So men's incomes, in fact, have been shown to almost triple in the years following a divorce. Hey guys, I was just editing this video and realized that I needed to do a quick fact check on myself because, of course, most guys weren't tripling their incomes. The point of the research was actually that the men's incomes were going up dramatically, in some cases tripling, way more cases than the women's incomes going up nearly that high, and that's what was so surprising in this research. On top of that, he doesn't have to look after the kids very often. Again, in the USA, sole custody is 79.9%. So he has all this free time to begin dating. And indeed, we do see that. Men move on and start dating and getting into serious relationships again far quicker when they don't have custody of the kids, and certainly far faster than women do when they do have sole custody of the kids. So while you certainly could argue that it appears women have some advantage in the actual divorce court system, after divorce, there is also an abundance of evidence to show that women end up worse financially than men do in the years after that. Okay. So if men have it so much better after divorce, how come the suicide rate is double that of women after divorce? So this statistic is completely correct. It's very robust and it's reflected in multiple Western countries. But it is a statistic. And like most statistics, it is wildly open to interpretation. Now, one of the most commonly cited reasons why this happens is to do with social connections. See, everyone knows that men have fewer social connections and less emotional support from their friends. And this is doubly true in marriages, because men have a habit of making their wives their sole point of contact for emotional support. When things are hard at work, when things are going rough in his life, when he's feeling down, it's his wife that he turns to almost 100% of the time. Women, on the other hand, almost always have friends that they turn to, not just the husband. So women end marriages with existing support networks. When men find themselves in divorce situations, they have absolutely nowhere to turn. And for the first time in many, many years, they find themselves completely alone and emotionally isolated. So no wonder the suicide rate goes up so far after divorce. But this is something that's completely avoidable and isn't an intrinsic part of the divorce process. We do have some very good data on which parent ends up being the custodian of children, that is, which parent gets the kids in a divorce. Now, how this goes and how unfair the system is definitely depends on what country you're in. So if you live in the United States, for example, 79.9% of the time, the mother is going to get the kids. However, things are rapidly changing in the rest of the world. In the EU, for example, it's a totally different story. Between 2013 and 2020, female custody rates have dropped from 72% all the way down to 54%. and it's still dropping year on year after that. So things are already starting to become a lot more fair in most of the civilized world. So the American Sociological Association recently found that divorces are initiated by women 70% of the time. And in fact, similar statistics are found around the world in other Western countries. So there's no reason to doubt this data. However, the bigger question is, why are women initiating divorce in the first place? Is it because they're given a financial incentive to do so? Now, the reason given in the common narrative that I hear is that because there is a corrupt court system that benefits women so strongly, when women think about divorcing a guy because they're likely to get half of all his stuff, many women just go, well, I'm out of here and I'm not going to put any effort in at all. First of all, even if a woman gets half of the guy's money, and that is a big if because it doesn't happen all the time, it's just possible, but even if she does, that's halving your quality of life financially. Okay, that is the difference between going from a new Porsche to an entry-level BMW. And what self-respecting gold digger is going to give up a Porsche? But being glib aside, halving your quality of life financially is a big deal. It's a big deal if you're wealthy, and it's especially a big deal if you're just average. No one does that simply on a whim. But there are more reasons than this. In fact, there are some very good statistical reasons to suspect that women are not feeling incentivized to leave the relationship based on a corrupt court system that favors women. And probably the best statistical reason that I could find came down to same-sex marriages, because lesbian marriages account for 72% of the divorces as opposed to 28% of the divorces in gay marriages. And there's absolutely no legal scam going on that helps either side in a lesbian marriage, and yet they're still divorcing with a very high rate. It seems far more likely that because women have more emotional support, they're willing to end a bad relationship more quickly than men who don't have that emotional support, right? Because we feel safer to leave once things get bad and we know that we should end it. Very often there's a good reason to believe men would continue on going if they don't have that support. Now, it is possible that maybe gay men have far more emotional support networks than straight men do as compared to lesbian women. But we don't have access to that data. At least I couldn't find it anywhere. So to be fair, that argument could still be open. It should also be said that married men live longer and are healthier than unmarried men. The reason for this shouldn't be a surprise. Wives have the habit of pushing their husbands to adopt healthier lifestyles. They push them to avoid things like drinking too much, smoking too much, and eating too much, which happen to be 3 of the major causes of death in most Western countries. So what do I think after having done all this research? Divorce sucks, and divorce sucks whether you're a man or a woman. And yes, out there in the world, gold diggers do exist who want to take men for everything they're worth. But at the same time, you also have men who are so desperate to have a sexy woman next to him that he's willing to overlook absolutely every red flag imaginable. And it does appear to be quite possible to mitigate some of the worst effects that marriage has on men. First and foremost, one of the biggest ones is you have to have emotional support network. Men need friends who can be good emotional anchors outside of any marriage. It doesn't matter how good your marriage is. Your wife should never, ever be your sole source of emotional support. I also think we need to be smarter about who we jump into long-term relationships with. Seriously, most men and women jump in without putting a lot of thought into the red flags, into the problems that are likely to come about from dating the person they're thinking of dating. It'd be a simple way to avoid future problems if we just took a moment to be a little bit more choosy about who we jump into bed with, figuratively speaking. Don't get into a relationship just because you want to feel loved or because you want a partner with you so people stop urging you to find someone. Don't do it because you want to have sex on tap. You need to have a partner who makes your life significantly better. You need to find a partner who adds value to your life, at least as much value that you are adding to theirs. Because ultimately, if things do go wrong and you do have to split up your assets, you will never feel like you're being robbed or stolen from because you're in a relationship with someone who adds just as much value as you have. And I want to be brutally honest here for a second. I think most couples shouldn't be together. I am a dating coach who supports people getting together and having happy, long-term relationships. And I believe that we are living in the middle of an epidemic of crap relationships. People stick together for all the wrong reasons. I go so far as to say that I think over half of all couples should split up. That over half of the people who are together right now would be happier if they were alone. But they're simply too scared to take that step. And in spite of that, as a dating coach, I really do believe there are massive benefits to being in a long-term relationship. There are emotional benefits, there are health benefits, heck, there are financial benefits so long as you guys stay together. But we as humans, on average, we have to make better decisions about who we get into relationships with. Because I promise you, a relationship with the wrong person is always, without fail, worse for your health in the long run than being alone. But being in a relationship with the right person, that makes life better for both of you. And it's something that's worth pursuing, even if it is a risk. So guys, I hope this video has been a little bit interesting. It's longer than some of my recent ones, but it really was a bit of a rabbit hole, and going through this research gave me a lot of time to stop and think about what I really think about long-term relationships for myself as a man, what I think about marriage, and whether that's something that I really want to pursue in my life. And yeah, I hope maybe I've given you more to think about, just as it gave me more to think about. Guys, as always, if you like this video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my future videos.